So that's our approach to comedy in general, but our focus today is really on Japanese comedy. And to kind of give you just a quick rundown of how we're going to do this today, we're first going to look at some of the traits that make Japanese comedy unique. And so we're going to look at like some of the factors that why Japanese comedy has kind of a unique style and what makes that different from Western styles of comedy. And we're also going to have a bit of a think about how that reflects Japanese culture. And then secondly, we're going to look at the idea of a more kind of universal comedy or like a universal approach to humor. How can we make audiences in other countries and in other cultures laugh with Japanese jokes? And then finally, time allowing, we're going to put some of that into practice with a live subtitling session. So we would love to hear some ideas from you then, okay?
Yes, I love some Jisai action. Thank you, Alice. 楽しみにしてる.
Okay. Well, as I said, we're kind of focusing a lot on manzai today, but you can kind of apply some of these ideas to other styles of comedies as well. But like this first two is really key to our discussion today. And that's the idea of tsukomi and boke. Can you tell us a bit about tsukomi and boke?
Sure. It's kind of like the idea of the crazy guy in the scene and the straight man in the scene. So the tsukomi being the person who has the higher level of intelligence or the person who's seeing things in a logical way, and the boke being the person who is kind of clowny and not really taking things too seriously. So this is obviously seen in a lot of different dramas and movies that you've seen before, but in manzai, just imagine the two people talking, the one person possibly misunderstanding something and the other whacking him up on the side of the head. Like think of, what is his name? Sanma-san on TV, right?
Yeah.
He has like a special stick just to whack the people who are boking him all the time. So he's like the classic tsukomi or the classic straight man in that situation.
Yeah, and even if you just like look at the vocabulary itself of tsukomi and boke, it's kind of like those ideas are written into the words themselves. Because tsukomi is from the verb tsukomu, which means like to poke into something or to wedge into something. And then boke comes from bokeru, which means like to be vague or to be hazy. So it's kind of like I'm not really paying attention. I'm taking it the wrong way. And so tsukomi boke, that's our key concept number one. Now, key concept number two is the idea of joge kanke.
Ooh.
And if you've ever lived in Japan for a while, you've probably encountered some kind of joge kanke before. It's very relatable, and it's a central organizing principle of a lot of Japanese social interactions. The idea of a joge kanke, or vertical relationship between two people. And so this can take a number of forms. So say like a boss and an employee, or a service worker and a customer, or a parent and a child, a teacher and a student, a senpai and a kohai. You can see these kinds of like vertical relationships of authority replicated in a lot of different settings. And one of the great things about comedy is it allows us to really upend authority. So you'll often see like a kind of challenge to the joge kanke in Japanese comedy.
That's very true, because like the relationships set up certain expectations in the audience's mind, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So it makes it easier to follow sometimes if you don't know the words. So for example, if I were watching something in Osaka Ben that I couldn't quite understand, I could see just by understanding the relationship, oh, okay, so this is how he should be talking to this person in this situation. So it kind of is like a helper in
yeah, it kind of like leads you into how the characters in a scene are going to be interacting with each other based on, you know, their intonation, what they're saying and whatnot. And that kind of ties into a final point here about furi and ochi. Furi and ochi. So the furi is the premise or the setup that goes into a joke or goes into a scene or goes into a gag. And then the ochi,
the punchline.
Yeah, the punchline. And this is like really like a neat analog with the idea of like setup and punchline in Western comedy as well. However, the main difference that you might find in Japanese comedy is it tends to be a little bit faster, and you tend to have like a lot more gags in quick succession.
So, yeah, you don't really find a very, very super long story with one big payoff.
No,
you
like,
find several, you know, it's kind of nice.
Like a lot of short gags along the way. And sometimes it means the ochi is maybe not like the huge laugh out loud line, but it's like the final kiri no itokoro, like a good place to end it at the end of those gags. So you can enjoy a whole konto or skit from start to finish.